On a sun-drenched Sunday afternoon, the Andersons' backyard buzzed with life as two families gathered for their regular get-together. It was the kind of day when the air felt light and laughter came easily, especially with the young ones at play. Among the gathering, the bond between Sebastian Wilson and little Sicil Anderson, though separated by 4 years, was growing deeper with each passing visit. Sebastian, now 7 years old, was the shy, thoughtful boy next door, his quiet demeanor often mistaken for timidity. He spent his time engrossed in books or exploring the backyard, always careful, always composed. In contrast, 3-year-old Sicil was the embodiment of untamed energy, with wild curls bouncing as she ran and a constant twinkle in her eye. She was always concocting new ways to shake up their otherwise peaceful afternoons. Today, Sebastian found a moment of calm, sitting on a wooden bench under the shade of the large oak tree, his nose buried in a book far too advanced for his age. His parents, Arthur and Jenny, along with Albert and Jane Anderson, sat not far off, chatting about how Jane and Jenny wanted to start the project to raise awareness about air pollution due to nearby industries. Across the yard, Sicil tiptoed closer, her small, chubby hands clenching a handful of brightly coloured water balloons, her mischievous grin impossible to miss. With the precision only a child with an unshakable sense of fun could muster, she aimed directly at Sebastian, who had no idea what was coming. In one swift, giggle-filled motion, Sicil launched the first balloon. It soared through the warm summer air before splattering onto Sebastian's lap. The cold water soaked through his shirt, causing him to leap to his feet, startled. He blinked in confusion, drops of water clinging to his brown hair as he looked down at the burst balloon. "Sicil!" he shouted, torn between amusement and disbelief as he wiped his face, now drenched from her sneak attack. What was that for? Sicil, only 3 and already a master of mischief, stood a few feet away, hands on her hips and eyes gleaming with triumph. Her infectious laughter filled the air as she looked up at him with pure delight. "Payback!" she declared, giggling so hard that she nearly toppled over, her cheeks flushed pink from the excitement. Sebastian couldn't help but smile despite the cold trickling down his back. Despite just being 7 himself, he was responsible and careful, usually. But around Sicil, he often found himself swept up in her spontaneous games. "Payback for what?" he asked, trying to sound serious but failing miserably as his lips twitched into a grin. "For being boring and reading instead of playing," Sicil replied confidently, her small feet shuffling as she got ready to run. "Fair enough," Sebastian conceded with a good-natured shrug. "But you're in trouble now." He darted toward her with mock determination, grabbing a nearby garden hose as his secret weapon. Sicil squealed with delight, her tiny legs pumping as she tried to escape his playful pursuit, but she was no match for Sebastian's longer strides. With a twist of the nozzle, a spray of water shot out, catching her in mid-run. She shrieked in surprise, the water soaking through her sundress, but her laughter only grew louder. "You're soaked now too," Sebastian declared, grinning ear to ear as he watched her dance around in the spray. He couldn't help but admire her spirit. She had a way of turning the simplest of days into adventures, and no matter how many times she tricked him, he could never stay mad at her. As the two continued their water battle, their parents watched with amusement from the patio. Jane Anderson shook her head, smiling. "Those two are going to keep us on our toes for years, aren't they?" Jenny Wilson laughed softly. "Sicil's a little whirlwind, that's for sure. Poor Sebastian never knows what's coming." Across the yard, Arthur, Sebastian's father, chimed in. "He may act like he's frustrated, but I think he enjoys the chaos more than he lets on." Albert's eyes twinkling with amusement, he glanced over at Jenny and Jane. "You two must be thrilled to be living so close again. I remember how inseparable you were as kids." "We are," Jane agreed with a grin, looking over at her longtime friend. "It's like we've picked up right where we left off." As if on cue, Arthur leaned in, his voice lowering just a touch. "Speaking of picking up, Albert, I don't know if you've heard, but the tender that you submitted last month will be announced later in the coming week. You may want to meet the magistrate in the meantime." Albert agreed. "Thank you for the heads up." Meanwhile, back in the yard, Sebastian had managed to trap Sicil with the garden hose, the water now drenching both of them as they laughed uncontrollably. Finally, after a few more seconds of their playful chase, Sicil, dripping wet and out of breath, ran toward him, her small hand reaching out to grasp his. "You win!" she declared, smiling up at him, her wide eyes full of affection. Sebastian looked down at her, his own heart softened by the sight of her messy, joyful face. For a moment, it felt like the world had shrunk to just the two of them. He squeezed her tiny hand in his, realizing that even though they were just kids, there was something special in their bond. Something that would last beyond the childhood pranks and playful battles. As Sicil grinned up at him, soaking wet and unapologetic, Sebastian couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, growing up next to this whirlwind wouldn't be so bad after all. A few years later. On a warm summer's day, the Anderson and Wilson families had gathered for what should have been a joyful afternoon, filled with laughter and light-hearted conversation. But this gathering was nothing like their usual one. Sicil and Sebastian, their only children, played by the pool, oblivious to the undercurrents of tension surrounding their parents. 6-year-old Sicil crouched behind a bush, her mischievous grin spreading across her face. Carefully, she crawled closer, her movements light as a whisper. Holding her breath, she tied the string to the legs of Sebastian's lounge chair, stifling her giggles. She tiptoed back a few steps, then gave the string a gentle tug. The chair creaked slightly, but Sebastian, lost in his moment of peace with his eyes closed, didn't stir. Sicil's grin widened, her small fingers trembling with excitement. Another tug. This time, the chair lurched forward and with a soft thud it collapsed beneath Sebastian. His startled yelp echoed through the quiet garden as he tumbled onto the grass in a heap of arms, legs and laughter. "Sicil, not again!" he shouted, more in shock than anger. But his tone was filled with amusement as he lay there, blinking in surprise. Unable to hold back any longer, Sicil burst from her hiding spot and doubled over with laughter. "Sorry, Seb, I couldn't resist," she managed between giggles, her eyes dancing with mischief. Sebastian sat up, shaking his head as his own laughter began to bubble up. He could never stay mad at Sicil, no matter how many pranks she pulled on him. Her mischievous charm was impossible to resist, and over the years, he had come to expect her playful antics. "You got me good," he admitted, a grin spreading across his face as he brushed off his clothes. "Well played," he added, giving her a nod of approval. But his expression quickly shifted to one of playful revenge, his eyes narrowing with a glint of determination. "But just you wait. Revenge is sweet." Sicil, sensing the change in his tone, squealed with delight, her body already tensing for what she knew was coming. Before she could make her escape, Sebastian was on his feet, chasing after her with a mock-serious expression on his face. "You're not getting away this time," he declared, closing the distance between them as Sicil darted around the yard, her laughter trailing behind her. With a burst of speed, Sebastian caught up to her, his arms encircling her waist. Sicil kicked her legs, squirming in his grasp, but it was no use. She was caught. "Sebastian, no!" she exclaimed through giggles, her voice filled with playful protest. "Don't you dare!" But Sebastian had no intention of letting her off the hook. His grin widened as he carried her toward the pool, ignoring her mock protests. "Oh, I dare," he teased, his voice full of triumph. Sicil's eyes widened as they neared the edge of the pool, and she squirmed harder in his grasp. "Seb, please, no!" she shrieked, her laughter making it impossible to sound serious. Without another word, Sebastian gave her a playful toss into the air, sending her splashing into the cool water with a delighted scream. As she surfaced, her hair slicked back and her cheeks flushed with excitement, Sicil raised her hands in surrender, water dripping from her fingertips. Okay, you win," she conceded, gasping between breaths of laughter, her eyes bright with amusement. Sebastian, still standing at the edge of the pool, crossed his arms, a teasing smile playing on his lips. "Need a hand getting out?" he asked, offering his hand with a dramatic flourish. Sicil's grin turned wicked, and in one swift motion, she grabbed his outstretched hand and yanked it hard. Caught off guard, Sebastian tumbled into the water with a splash, his yelp drowned by the sound of both of them laughing uncontrollably. From the corner of his eye, Sebastian noticed something strange. The laughter of the adults that usually filled the air during these gatherings had faded. Glancing back toward the patio, he caught sight of his parents, Jenny and Arthur, standing close to Albert Sicil's father, and Jane Sicil's mother was missing. Janny, Sicil's mother, had met a car accident, but there was something more ominous beneath the surface. It wasn't just a random crash. Someone had tried to sabotage the environmental campaign she had been working on with Jenny, an effort to raise awareness about rising sea levels and increasing pollution. Jane's accident seemed like more than just bad luck, and the concern on Albert's face confirmed it. Albert, normally calm and collected, was pacing anxiously. His movements were quick, his face lined with worry as he fumbled for his car keys. The hospital had called moments ago. Jane needed him. "Albert," Arthur said, stepping up and placing a hand on his friend's shoulder. "I've already filed an official complaint. This wasn't just an accident. We'll find whoever's behind this. You go to Jane, she needs you now. I'll take care of the rest." Albert, torn between his desire to be there for his wife and his need to protect their campaign, nodded at Arthur, grateful for the support. "Thank you. Just make sure they're held accountable. Jane and Jenny's work is too important to be sabotaged like this." "I've got this," Arthur reassured him. "Focus on Jane." Meanwhile, Jenny stepped in to offer comfort. "Don't worry about Sicil. I'll take care of her while you and Arthur deal with this. We'll make sure she stays happy and out of harm's way." Albert gave her a grateful look, the weight of the world on his shoulders. With one last glance at the group, he hurried off toward the hospital, leaving Arthur and Jenny to manage the situation. Sebastian, now standing at the edge of the pool, caught all of this through the corner of his eye. His carefree smile dimmed slightly as he saw his father and Jenny exchanging serious words. Something was wrong, he knew that much. But Sicil, still splashing and laughing in the water, was blissfully unaware. Her giggles echoed through the air, and Sebastian decided right then and there. "Want to race?" he asked, a smile plastered back on his face as he looked at her. Sicil's eyes lit up with excitement, her young spirit caught in the thrill of the moment. "You're on!" she said, diving under the water with glee. Sebastian, watching her, knew it was up to him to keep her in the dark. Sicil didn't need to know that her parents were facing a crisis, or that their mother's campaign had been deliberately targeted. All she needed was to enjoy the day, free from worry. As they swam back and forth, laughing and splashing each other, Sebastian kept one ear trained on the conversation happening on the patio. He could hear snippets, something about a formal investigation, about finding the culprit, but he did his best to tune it out. His main focus was Sicil. She didn't deserve to have her world disrupted by the harsh realities of adult life. Jenny, watching from the sidelines, noticed the way Sebastian worked to keep Sicil entertained. Her heart swelled with gratitude for the young boy who, even at such a young age of 10, showed a quiet strength and maturity beyond his years. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm orange glow over the yard, Sicil and Sebastian continued to splash in the pool, their laughter mingling with the gentle hum of the evening. Behind them, the adults were working to uncover the truth. But for now, Sebastian had succeeded in his mission. Sicil remained blissfully unaware of the tension that hovered just beyond the pool's edge, wrapped in the safety and warmth of their playful summer day. When Sicil was 9 and Sebastian 13, the bond they shared had only deepened over the years. However, when Sebastian had gone away for a week-long school trip, Sicil felt his absence badly. She missed him terribly, and in her young heart, the absence felt like abandonment. Though she knew it was just a trip, she couldn't shake the sadness and frustration that had built up during the week. She had no one she wanted to play with, despite the large army of friends who always surrounded her. She felt she had no one to share her secrets or mischievous plans. By the time Sebastian returned, Sicil had convinced herself that he had forgotten all about her. The day Sebastian came back, he was full of excitement, eager to surprise his best friend. He hid behind the curtain in the living room, stifling his laughter as he anticipated her arrival. His heart pounded with the excitement of seeing her face light up when he revealed himself. He had no idea just how upset she'd been in his absence. Sicil's small footsteps echoed through the hallway. Her mood still sours from the week of missing him. She entered the room, her face a mix of boredom and lingering sadness, completely unaware of what was about to happen. The curtain she passed by suddenly rustled, and before she could register it, Sebastian jumped out with a mischievous grin on his face, arms wide open. "Boo!" he shouted, his voice filled with playful excitement. Sicil squealed, her hands flying to her chest in shock, her wide eyes full of surprise. But as soon as she saw it was Sebastian, her expression shifted from surprise to a deep, almost exaggerated frown. Instead of bursting into laughter like she usually did, her face hardened and her lower lip trembled with a pout. She crossed her arms and glared at him. "You scared me, Seb," she said, her voice carrying an edge of frustration. "Where were you? You left me. I thought you weren't coming back." Sebastian, expecting laughter and joy, was taken aback by the sudden shift in her tone. His grin faltered and guilt washed over him as he realized just how upset she had been. "Hey, I'm sorry, Sicil," he said softly, his usual playful energy replaced with a serious tone. "I didn't mean to leave you like that. It was just a school trip. I had to go." "You abandoned me," Sicil interrupted, her brows furrowed, her voice shaking slightly as she stomped her foot. "You didn't even take me with you. I was so bored and sad." Sebastian's heart sank. Seeing Sicil upset, her face contorted in frustration and sadness, tugged at something deep within him. He couldn't stand it when she was anything less than happy. Without hesitation, he dropped to his knees to meet her at eye level. Hey, no, don't cry," he said, taking her hands in his. "I missed you too, I promise. I never want you to feel like I'm leaving you behind, ever. Next time I'll take you with me, okay? Wherever I go, you'll come too. I don't like seeing you sad, not for even 1 second." Sicil sniffled, her fierce pout starting to fade as she looked at him, her eyes searching his for sincerity. "You promise?" Sebastian nodded earnestly. "I promise. I couldn't stand it if you were sad, Sicil. You're my best friend. Wherever I go, you go. Deal?" Sicil studied him for a moment, her small frame shaking off the last bit of anger. Slowly her lips curled into a smile as she wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She looked at him with renewed trust, her eyes sparkling again, but this time with warmth instead of mischief. "Okay, deal," she said, her voice soft but resolute. Sebastian grinned, relieved to see the Sicil he knew return. "Good," he said, standing up and ruffling her hair. "Now, how about we play? You've got to tell me everything I missed while I was away." Sicil finally laughed, swatting his hand away playfully. "You missed a lot, and I've got some new pranks to try on you." "Oh no," Sebastian groaned in mock horror, but secretly he was just glad to see her smiling again. From that moment on, Sebastian made a silent vow to never let Sicil feel abandoned again. He couldn't bear to see her upset, and he would do anything to make sure she was happy, because to him nothing mattered more than her smile.